Hello, everybody. We'll be starting in 5 minutes. Welcome, everybody. We'll be starting in 4 minutes. Welcome, everyone. We are starting in 3 minutes. Welcome, everybody. We'll be starting in 1 minute. Hello there. Welcome, everybody, to the Select Hub expert panel on how to successfully approach ERP software implementation. maximize value, and minimize disruptions. My name is Keith Hagan. I am the VP of Marketing at Select Hub. And just a moment, get my slides working. And the first thing I want to cover before we get to our panelists and discussion is about getting an implementation right. So software selection can be overwhelming. Implementing new ERP software is a process that can get tedious, confusing, and exhausting. Some of the challenges in implementing ERP are goal setting, expectation management, requirements analysis, lack of buy-in across the organization, vendor selection, integration of software, and price comparison. All very important facets of it. So before we get started, we want to start with a poll and just find out where everybody on here is. And if we'll launch that poll right now. There we go, it's open. And I'll read out the results when we're towards being done. But we want to find out exactly where you are. This will help our panel and myself better speak to the needs of the audience here. So thank you very much for your participation in the poll. We'll give everybody 1 minute before moving on to the next slide. Okay, we are going to hit a couple other slides and then I'll give everybody the results of the poll. This will allow everybody to finish up and vote. So, and for those of you just coming on, feel free to answer that poll at your convenience. The topics that we're going to cover in this panel are how to achieve confidence in a project, picking the right team, choosing the right partners, and setting the right goals and requirements. So what we want everyone to take away from this, and what the panel will try to speak to, is awareness of the ways to achieve implementation success, what it takes to achieve seamless integration of a new ERP system, and recognizing the possible gaps in the selection process. Okay, introduce our panel. Our first panelist, Aaron Koss, comes with 25 years of experience, expert at tech strategy, organizational leadership, and people management. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is David Dozer, president of Blaze IT, and he's 20 years experience, expert at applying technology and finding solutions to solve complex process problems.
Good afternoon. Appreciate being here.
Welcome, David. Next, we have Sam Gupta, founder of WBS Rocks, 20 years experience, expert at building and managing large enterprise software programs. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you so much for having me, Keith.
And next, we have Shelley Gore, a cloud expert, a bigger view. Sorry, Shelley, I had to tilt my head to read that. 25 years experience, expert at NetSuite, ERP administration, design, development, and implementation. Welcome, Shelley.
Thank you so much, and thanks everybody for being here with us.
And next we have Lauren Godoff. Lauren is a senior consultant with SelectHub. He's got 25 years experience. He's expert at marketing, sales, product management, and operations and technology. Okay. So welcome to our panel. Thanks, thank you guys for joining us and being part of this. And welcome to all the attendees. I want to share the results right now before we get to the panel questions. In terms of where you are at in your ERP projects to currently, we've got 41% researching solutions, 13% are in the requirements gathering stage, 19 are in the RFP/shortlisting stage. Just 6 are doing the final solution and contract negotiation right now. And then we've got 20% of you that are doing implementation. So for the most part, 41%, the biggest one is researching solutions. So panelists will speak to all of those phases, I'm sure. But it's great to have that information. Thank you, everybody, for contributing to that poll. Okay, the first question is about covering all requirements. Is a completely thorough goals and requirements phase necessary to select the right ERP? And I'd like to first start off asking Erin to kick us off in this discussion. Erin?
Thank you, Keith. I appreciate it. Welcome to everybody. You know, we tend to think about this, selecting the right ERP is, do you need thorough goals and requirements? The answer generically is, of course, that makes sense. But the thing we think about, I think more than anything, is do you have a clear understanding and clarity on why you're here? Why are you selecting an ERP? So I think having real clarity on, from a strategic level, from an executive team level, why are you here? What's driving your need for an ERP? And there's a variety of things. I know many of those things we're going to talk about probably today. And then from there, the question for us is, do you have a process in place for getting you where you're trying to go when it comes to the solution that you're looking for? And so only with that process, then we start talking about, do you have then the people you need to get you there? So do you know why you're going where you're going? Do you know that you have a process for getting there? We call it kind of our roadmap. And then do you have people allocated to help you get there? What we find is that typically companies really struggle with having the capabilities and capacity to do a selection because it's not something they do all of the time. And so what we say, if you have those 3 things and a company has gotten real clarity on why they need to go there, and they have the people ready and they have a process for it, then and only then do we say, okay, now let's look at those requirements. Because the thing we talk about is the most successful way you're going to get to selecting an ERP solution, once you have those other 3 things in place, is by really being clear about then more in the weeds, functionally, technically, and then what do you need from your supplier? What are your specific company requirements? If you have those other 3 things, getting to those requirements will be possible. And also it's just really critical to getting you to the right ERP solution that you're looking for. And so we say having those 3 things in place makes requirements, getting to those requirements doable. And of course, it's imperative to have those, because then you're putting yourself in the driver's seat for any selection process that you're going to participate in, because you know why you're there. You've got the people helping you get through the process. You have a plan. And now and then you go and you drive from a place of having requirements. So yeah, I think it is. David, what do you think?
Great. Yeah, I agree 100%, Erin. The short answer is absolutely yes. You need goals and requirements going into this whole process. And I really think to kind of dovetail on the points that you made there, that it's really about starting with those goals, because based on your organization, those goals could be dramatically different. If you've run your business thus far on spreadsheets and sending emails and paper forms, a goal may be as simple as, we need to track inventory better. But if you're more mature and, maybe already using an ERP system that isn't quite cutting it, the goal may be much, more broader, in that we really need to, get labor rates down. We need to increase tack time on products that are going out the door. So really kind of starting with saying, okay, for us and what our business looks like right now, what are those goals? And then that allows you to really thoroughly dive into those requirements to meet those specific goals. And a lot of times what we encounter is it's really, there's kind of a fear of getting started with the process as a whole, because it's this very sort of gray thing that's hard to wrap your arms around. So, knowing what those goals are, is it all, it could be increasing sales. It such a wide variety of things to really sit down and say, okay, here's our goals. Now let's back into what those requirements are to meet those goals. And then frankly, the last piece of that puzzle is, then finding the right ERP system and the right implementation team to support those requirements that ultimately support those goals. So it's really about being agile and iterative through that whole process.
Mm-hmm.
So Sam, what do you think about that?
Some great points, guys. Thank you so much, Aaron and David, for sharing those thoughts. And this is probably going to be $1 million question, in my opinion. And obviously, at the goal level, this is going to be super important. But in our experience, when we get involved in a lot of different ERP implementations, it is those line level requirements that typically make or break an ERP implementation. Each of the tools and the software that we have available in the market, they are designed for a specific purpose. They are designed for a specific business and the industries. So if you don't know those line level requirement pre-implementation, it's very likely that you might end up selecting the wrong tool, and then you might be creating an ERP on top of ERP, which is never fun. Okay, and sometimes when we get into these engagements, the customers have invested millions and millions of dollars in developing something that could have been very easy if they selected the right tool to begin with, and they could have had much better life. But just because they did not have the documented requirements to begin with, and because of that, the selection was off to start with. By the way, you have to document these requirements anyways in the implementation phase, because if you don't document, how are you going to test it? How are you going to train your users? So if you do it in the pre-implementation phase, number one, you can save your implementation. Number two, you can save a lot of time from the implementation. Your implementation is going to be faster. Your training is going to be far more efficient. And overall, your life is going to be far easier. Shelly, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. Great points everybody's making. I think it's so important to know, why are you documenting goals? Why are you documenting requirements? Aaron, I just wrote down words people said. Clarity. I think that's really important. David, you mentioned it, iterative processing. Can we phase it? Do we need to do it all at once? Because sometimes it's okay to do phases if it makes sense for the organization. You're getting rid of some chaos over here to free up time to do the next phase and the next phase. Plus, you're getting the skills as you go forward. So I think it's very important to know, why are we documenting the goals and requirements? And letting it lead, as Sam was saying, to more of a map of where are you going, and are you meeting those goals as you go along? Are you actually engaging with those goals, and do you have the right people to engage in those goals? Mm-hmm. So I think it's very important, but I also think it's important to keep it focused on what is most important to you personally. Mm-hmm. And not get anywhere in the weeds. What is most important? As if you had a map and you're driving in the dark and you want to get somewhere. How do you do that and get there? Mm-hmm. So that's how I see it. Lauren, how do you see it?
Yeah, I think you all bring up some great points. The way I would approach this is to separate goals and requirements. Right? Every project needs goals, right? Because you're driving the project to attain those goals. And those goals might change somewhat based on what you learn, right, through the project. But essentially, they drive and steer the project. They help you find the right people and the right process, right? Requirements, as Sam was saying, are critical to the success of a selection project. And in the case of ERP, we know the devil's in the details. And if you could capture those details early on, if you can ensure they're well structured, they're well worded, they can be communicated, then you minimize misinterpretation. You minimize the ability to be like two trains passing in the night. You know, you're saying one thing, the vendor's saying another. So having goals helps drive the project and find the right resources to drive the project and measure the success of the project. Having well-defined requirements is critical to an enterprise software evaluation and selection project, because it, like Sam said, will help not only through evaluation and selection, but will set you up more appropriately for implementation success. And truthfully, that is the goal of an evaluation and selection project. So, great points, everybody.
Yeah, excellent, wonderful. Let's get on, carry on with the second question. Is it necessary to define the enterprise architecture selection project? Aaron,
I'll jump in here if you'll let me. That'd be great. You know, we might disagree on this one potentially, because I've seen this thought about both ways, right? Either you need to do a deep dive or you stay high level. You know, we tend to think about this again. We go to the top and we ask ourselves strategically, what are the business issues? What are the goals and objectives, as I mentioned before? And so when it comes to enterprise architecture and some of the more technical details, I would say a couple of things. One is, I think strategically, you need to have a general idea of where you're coming from and what that means to where you're going. So, you know, what does your technology look like today? Is it on-premise? Is it hosted? Is it already in the cloud? Are you supporting it internally? Are you outsourcing your IT? How much of your, you know, how old are your current systems? You know, we've had some clients who are looking to replace their enterprise solutions and therefore their back-end technology, and it's very, very old. And they're, you know, it's a bigger leap maybe than some companies. And so again, where are you coming from is, and where, you know, where is it you're trying to go? Many of our clients now are saying, you know, we want all in the cloud. We want partial, you know, we want a hybrid model. And, you know, it's really looking at, I think, strategically, what is going to enable the business to do their business most effectively. And so when we do a selection with a client, we tend to always ask those questions at a pretty high level so that we are driving then the requirements in the details in a way that allow for some flexibility, because what we like to do is say, you know, that the business needs to drive the ultimate requirements at the end of the day. But when it comes to enterprise architecture and technical, sometimes the level of detail here varies. So we say, make sure that you have a strategic perspective going in. Where are you trying to go? Get real clarity. Am I all cloud? Am I hybrid? You know, outsource, insource, those big picture items need to be defined, we believe, during the selection process. And then once you've got those requirements out there to the degree that you need, I think it gives you then some flexibility to have some really good conversations with the potential partners you invite to the process with you, who, depending on where the products and solutions are, then will allow you to strike a balance between your rigid technology requirements, maybe in some areas, but then in the areas where you have more flexibility, sort of having a really rich conversation with those potential partners, because these products we find that we are looking at during the selection process, you know, generally speaking, ERP products are, you know, all very evolved, and the back end also all very evolved in their own life cycle of product development. But this changes over time, and so each time, so we like to give room here a little bit for conversations between potential partners and companies to make sure they ultimately have the detailed fit, if you will, between technical and enterprise architecture. So again, starting at the top, make sure the strategy is well known, communicated in the requirements, and then leaving some room in there to have those important discussions as you go through the evaluation process, is what we believe. David, how about you? What comes to mind to you when we talk about this?
I'll jump in there. I tend to agree in that it's a solid maybe, because it definitely matters in the scheme of the project. But it's very important to not get too hung up on the tech stack or the architecture at the beginning of the process. You know, if organizationally you already have an IT infrastructure and you've got servers and hardware, and maybe you prefer to have all that in-house, you know, then the question's kind of already answered for you. If you're in that sort of middle ground, you know, it needs to align with what your ultimate strategic goals are, but at the same time, you don't let that you know, really muddy, you know, the ultimate selection of what's best, because technology is far enough ahead today that, you know, very honestly, you can take an old legacy system, you know, throw that up on a cloud environment and have folks getting in via a remote desktop connection, even though it's an old kind of client server app. And you know, is that clunky? Yeah, it can be, you know, but at the same time, if it falls into what's solving your goals, that's what really matters. And frankly, a lot of the clients we work with, at the very beginning, they say, you know what, we don't know. That's something we want to almost kind of discover as we go through the requirements gathering, and kind of want to have options, because too, that's going to have a cost associated with it, whether you're going software as a service and true cloud, whether you're going a hybrid model or you're going straight on-prem. You know, there's going to be costs, there's going to be hidden costs as well, you know, in people and hardware and things like that. So it's an important part of the process, but it's not the end all be all, because you may very well change your mind halfway through, and it becomes paramount as you get to the end of that selection process and are saying, okay, here's the solution that's right for us. You know, how do we want to disperse this to the end users? And ultimately, is it the right technology to support, you know, not just what we want to do today, but what we want to do in the future as well. So, Sam, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, some great points, guys. And I am actually going to set the stage first, you know, to define what enterprise architecture really is. And I don't know about you guys, you know, which countries you have lived in. You know, I lived in a lot of different countries, developing as well as developed. And one of the differences that you are going to notice in the developing world and the developed world is developing world is going to have a lot of chaos overall, because they don't follow any architecture for their cities, for their houses. Now, when you are building a house in the developed world, they have the architectural principles. So now, what is an enterprise architecture? If you look at a company is never going to require just one system. ERP system is not the answer for every problem that you have in your company. You are probably going to be using 5 systems or maybe 15 systems. Now, your enterprise architecture is going to be your data points. You are going to require customer in every single system. You are going to require vendors in every single system. You are going to require your SKUs and items in every single system. And typically what companies do is, when they don't define the enterprise architecture or the business architecture, if you ask your e-commerce guy, he is over e-commercing that system. If you ask ERP guy, they are over ERPing that system. So if you don't have the refined architecture in terms of who's going to be your source of authority for your customer data, for your SKU, how your interactions are going to flow from one system to the next, if you don't have that defined, this is going to be $1 billion question, and most likely your ERP implementation is going to fail. Shelly, what are your thoughts?
Well, these are all great points. Thank you guys so much. I want to echo what you just said, because it's having a map. It's knowing where you're going and why you're going where you're going. And I want to add on to that a little bit to what all of you have said, and say that what I see a lot is people try to map their old processes and their architecture to the new architecture. And I work in NetSuite. I know David does as well. And when we work in NetSuite, everybody wants to be live in 100 days. That's the big suite success model. If you want to be live in 100 days, you got to get really realistic about what are your processes, what is key, what has to stay there, would be there, and what can you map to the new system, to the way the new system works. And I hear this all the time. In NetSuite, there's so much flexibility. It's one of the biggest strengths, and it's also a huge way to shoot yourself in the foot because you can actually make all these customizations, and then it's very difficult to upgrade. So this brand new release comes from NetSuite with all this great functionality, and you're busy trying to get all the configurations and special things you did to work with that new configuration. And so if you can understand your architecture, understand your processes, understand what's critical, but be brave. That's the term I hear from people who weren't brave. Be brave and try to map to that new system, because there's a lot of best practices in there that NetSuite and others came up with, even people in your industry. And you can just map into some new systems that actually might let you even grow as a company and an organization as you go forward, and even acquire companies, because One World and NetSuite, it's all about acquisition, having a flexible chart of accounts, bringing new companies in. But if you have mapped all your old stuff over there, you are stuck in that house, in that architecture, and maybe you can't do the addition you want to do. So that, that's kind of pulling some of that together in my mind, and how you can be very cautious when you do this. Lauren, what do you think?
Yeah, I think understanding the what has to happen to support the business has to be defined and has to form part of that functional and technical requirements hierarchy, okay? Because like Sam was saying, in mid-sized, large organizations, there's multiple systems. In the e-commerce world, you're most definitely working with systems other than ERP, WMS, and you need to make sure data flows, data is validated, data is authentic, right? And then, of course, everybody wants to report. So where is the data coming from, and how is it being validated and verified? So the only way that can happen effectively is by understanding what data elements are required to run the business, where are they coming from, document those. But like Aaron was saying, don't worry so much about the how as at this stage. Learn from the different systems, explain to them what it is you need to achieve, and hear them out. Listen to what they can suggest to achieve your ends. But if you don't have them documented, then you can't ask those questions, and they turn into quagmires when it comes time to implementation. Back to you, Keith. There you go.
Thank you, Lauren. Next question is, how do you get and keep users engaged throughout the process? We'll start with Aaron again. Aaron?
Oh, excellent. Well, this is one of my favorite questions, because it's really people focused, in my opinion, and it's the secret sauce, right? To anything we're going to try and do here, with business processes probably being a close second. But in any case, getting and keeping users engaged. It's like consulting group. We have what we call the 3 C's, which are connection, communication, and collaboration. And we believe that those 3 things, really in any context, business or personal, are going to usually lead you to a successful outcome when we're dealing with people. The thing we think about when we apply it to the project work that we do in evaluation and selection of ERP is, again, a top-down approach. So, to get and keep users engaged is kind of a multifaceted. It's the 3 C's being a big part of it, just sort of philosophically. But then we look to the leadership team and ask ourselves, do we have proper sponsorship, engagement, and involvement at the senior level? Are they committed to the process of selection and implementation? And if they are, and therefore if they are, have they allocated the right subject matter experts to be involved in the process? We always talk about ERP being an effort that is 3 legs of a stool, right? It's the solution provider, which is key. It's the experts in the outside consultants, probably, that bring the capabilities and capacities to have these kinds of conversations that companies don't have very often. But that primary leg is the company itself, right? There's nobody that can replace that subject matter expertise. Usually people that have been at the organization a long time, usually people that are really deep expertise in their own functions. And so it is so critical to have these folks involved from the beginning and to have that continuity throughout, certainly the ERP evaluation, but also during the implementation. So when we're thinking about this and our clients engage us in the process, we start at the top and we really get a commitment from the executive team, their involvement, their sponsorship, and then getting the right people on the bus early on, but also looking downstream to the implementation and asking ourselves, who's going to stay part, who's going to be just part of the evaluation, and who's going to be part of the implementation. So we're always looking down that road to make sure we're thinking ahead about that. Because one of the big challenges that we've seen historically, you know, when we're doing large enterprise projects, you know, think publicly traded companies, big companies, they typically have the resources to pull people out of the organization to focus on evaluation, selection, and implementation. They backfill those roles potentially, right? Well, in the small and mid-sized market, which is where the volume of selections and implementations are happening today, that is just not an option. These companies run lean. They have a budget. And so when people are, you know, you get people involved, keeping them involved is really hard because they have a day job. And so for us, what we talk about is, again, starts at the top. They've got to have permission to be there. The 3 C's matter because that's how we want to engage and show up for one another and just play together, if you will. But then in the weeds, it's once we've got the right people in the seat to do the work that we need to do of evaluation, eventually implementation, keeping them involved requires a really consistent cadence, if you will, and a roadmap and a plan. So I think it's all 3 of those things: top level support, right people, right seats, but then a consistent cadence for communicating all along the way to keep them engaged. You know, and then finally, just recognizing that keeping folks engaged in light of their day job, in light of their other responsibilities and the other things I mentioned, is going to be a constant challenge potentially. We certainly have seen this to be the case. Frankly, we see it less so in the implementation than we do, less so in the evaluation than we do in the implementation, because the implementation is longer. But it is something that is, I think, a conversation that needs to be revisited frequently. And be something that you shine a light on often and are in dialogue about often as well, both at the senior level, having to remind, hey, you're committed, you've committed these folks, you know, continuing to have those conversations, and then continuing to be as supportive as you can in helping people stay engaged who are trying to split their time between these 2 areas. So again, collaboration, communication, and connection usually helps get that done, and it's a constant effort. David, what shows up for you when we talk about this?
Yeah, those are great points, and those 3 C's are super important throughout the whole life cycle of the project. And one of the things as an industry, I think we don't always talk about enough or put enough focus on, or maybe kind of brush under the rug, is how important it is, you know, not just with those folks that are part of the selection committee, but the people that are going to ultimately be using the software day in and day out, how important it is to really get their buy-in and engagement in the project. And one of the biggest problems with that in getting that engagement and keeping it high throughout the course of the project is, you know, we sometimes think that those people care about different things than they really do. And I'll admit, I've done it. I think we've all probably done it, and it's easy to do it through the selection process, in that, you know, over the years, we've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different softwares. So whether it's a mature product like a, you know, Macola, Mapix, or an SAP B1 product, or, you know, something that's newer like a NetSuite or Acumatica, those sort of products. At the end of the day, you know, we sometimes think that the people using the software care, and they maybe don't. You know, if I'm in purchasing or I'm in payables, what I care about is my life being easier. And I don't really care so much about, is this a cloud product? Is this installed on my computer? How do I access it? I don't care. I care about, you know, having more time to focus on value add things throughout the day. So what becomes important is that communication throughout the project, and saying, okay, I'm the payables person. Look, our new software, we're going to do this optical character recognition and map, you know, supplier invoices into the system, and you're not going to have to key everything in. That I care about. And those are the sort of things that, you know, it's important for management and the project team to thoroughly communicate throughout the life of the project to keep that engagement high, keep the users interested, and ultimately get them excited about the project. And Sam, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, some great points, guys. Amazing insights. And one of the things that I'm going to mention is we are invited in a lot of different engagements. And what these companies have done is they have implemented one of the fanciest technology out there. Okay, they invested a lot of money. And then finally, the biggest pain point these executives are going to have is nobody really uses the system. And then we are invited to discover, okay, what was the reason why people are not using the system? And then we ask the question, who really implemented the ERP? And the executives are going to say, we hired really smart people. They went to the executive room, to the boardroom. We had our CFO, super sharp guy. We had our, the supply chain executive. They all decided in the room, they all implemented, and finally they give it to users. And now users are trying to figure out how to use the system. Here's the problem in this approach. Your real users for the ERP are going to be the guys who are on the shop floor. Those are going to be the people who are scanning that barcode on a daily basis. If they don't get the system, it doesn't matter what technology you are using, doesn't matter how smart your implementation team is, you have to involve them from the get-go. You have to involve them in the pre-implementation phase. And that's why documenting those requirements is key. Whether you talk about requirement, from your sales, from your operations, from your warehouse to inventory to purchasing, the more you involve your user, the better adoption you are going to have for your system. I'm going to tell you one more story. Okay, we were working with one of the fastest growing companies in Canada. They had figured out every single technology requirement by themselves. They had no IT to begin with when they started working there. WooCommerce, they had implemented all by themselves, okay? And they wanted to, now they were growing really fast. They wanted to get into the ERP. And, they were working with a lot of different companies to implement this ERP. And for them, they were always like, we have always figured this out. How difficult can ERP be? And we implemented the ERP, and their comment, again, this is a very smart team, sharp team. Okay, not every team is going to be that sharp skilled. Their comment was, ERP is almost like learning a new language. Okay, we cannot do this in 3 months. So when companies comment that an ERP can be implemented in 45 days, they are being unreal. ERP is the training, it's coaching, it's learning new language. Okay, it's different ways of doing things. The more gentle you are with your users, the better adoption you are going to have for your system. Shelly, what do you think?
Great comments, everybody. I really like the word gentle that you just used, which isn't used very often, and it's very important. ERP, when I go on site a lot, which is one of my favorite things to do, and it's been rough the last year and a half, because I like to look people in the eyes. Because what happens is people hear about ERP, and they hear about these consultants out there, and they're scared. They won't tell you, especially, if somebody's kind of tough or whatever. They're scared. They have a lot of fear. How do you deal with fear in people? Leadership, knowledge, listening, gentle, sometimes firm. You have to be sometimes firm. We're doing this, guys. We got to do this. But okay, because David, you said it. I work a lot in food and beverage manufacturing. The fellow on the floor who's the leader there, or the lady, her job or his job is to get that stuff out the door today with the expiration dates, or the refrigerated truck or whatever. There's nothing else is as important as that. So what do we do? How do we talk to that person? They're scared. They've never met me or the team or people. They don't feel heard. The first thing you do is you listen and you look around and you see the 1 or 2 areas that are really going to help that person. And David said it so well, get their job done and get that stuff out the door more efficiently or more steadily. And also there's a principle that you get 10% more productivity when people know you're watching them. And that sounds like Big Brother. It's not. It means they know you're engaged. They know you're going to help them. They know you're going to be there for them. When they say, this new system, if we do this, it's going to make my job really hard. I can't get the stuff out the door. They need you to listen to them say that. You need to solve those issues for them, which goes way back to our mapping and some of the areas we talked about before. but they need to know you're there and listening to them, and you need to be firm sometimes as well. So I like the word gentle, I like the word firm. It's a combination of all of that, because you're leading a group and they need to feel okay with you, the process, and what's going to happen to them, because that's going to be their big question. Lauren, what do you think?
Well, I think a lot of things. I think, trying not to be repetitive, because you guys brought up some good points, but if we take a step back and we identify that for a sanctioned project, right, one with a budget and a timeline, the ultimate success of that project is implementation success with minimal business disruption. The only way that can be achieved is if people are part of the process. And the people are users. They could be line users, they could be admin users, they could be executive users, they could be what I'll call external users, right? Like vendors, suppliers, consumers, what have you. So at the end of the day, for that sanctioned project to work and succeed, you need people to buy in. If people are part of the decision process, if they're part of the planning process, they have skin in the game, they're more likely to make it work. Great. Now comes the hard part. How do you do it knowing that the majority of people on the project have day jobs and you're not allowing them, or you can't afford for them to sacrifice their day jobs? So you've got to find tools and ways and means to be creative and efficient to enable them to contribute to the project, feel useful, right? Feel valued without neglecting their day jobs. And there are ways to do it. There are smart ways to drive these projects. What companies tend to do is take shortcuts and skimp, okay, on the early stage activities of evaluation and selection, thinking that, we'll pick it up at implementation time. Or we don't need that, or we really know what we need. But your users are going to help you define the critical use cases that have to be part of evaluating what systems can or cannot support your business. So the bottom line is there are ways to keep users engaged. You must keep them engaged to have that buy-in, to have the access to information, and they are going to be part of making that new system work. So the sooner they can get their head and hands wrapped around it, the better off the organization will be.
Yeah.
Back to you, Keith.
All right, thank you, Lauren. So the final question is, should you be focused mainly on the key business processes that must be addressed by ERP for your organization today and in the near future? Let's go back to Erin.
Yeah. Thanks, Keith. I would say generically, of course, yes, right? But let's look at the why of this just a little bit. Lauren, I think you talked about this just a little bit. Implementation success is ultimately what we're trying to achieve down the road. And the question is, how do we do that? And if we bite off more than we can chew from the very beginning, it's going to be really difficult. The one thing we've learned during the implementation, doing multiple implementations with clients over the years, is these are really large projects. They're transformative in nature, so they're large, they're complex, they're time consuming, and they're expensive. And the question is how do you get the return on that value on that investment as quickly as possible? How do you do these projects in a way that I always say doesn't, respects that you don't want to have wear and tear on your employees. You want them to be bought in and excited and engaged about this thing that's supposed to make everything better for everybody. And so if you try and do more than you can do, these projects risk going on and on and on and never quite getting that first step over the finish line, which is the place you need to get in order to optimize and take on new things and innovation and do some of the longer term things you want to do. And so recognizing that these projects are super complex, expensive, and time consuming, the question we always have is, what's our crawl, walk, run strategy? How do we focus on the most critical business processes in the organization, the thing that really drives the business, the thing that serves our customers, our partners the most, in order to get that first step over the finish line? And so we talk about, for most companies, this is usually what we call the core 4. I've actually extended this to the core 5 processes. In fact, it's interesting. One of the most popular posts on our blog right now has to do with the core 4 processes for ERP implementation success. And this is why you need a place to start in order to do all the amazing things you want to do in your organization strategically, creatively, and innovatively. But you got to get that foundation in. And if you try and bite off more or the kitchen sink, it's going to make it really tough. We've seen clients that should have been implemented in 9 months to 12 months take more like 12 to 24 months because they want to do all 11 key business processes. So we recommend, to the degree you can, that customers really try and focus on what are the key business processes that drive value to their customers and their partners. They're usually things like concept to product, market to customer, order to cash, demand to supply. The 5th one I always throw in there because it's just got to be there for ERP is procure to pay, right? These are familiar to us all, but sometimes we go beyond that and we start worrying about fixed assets and CRM and HR, all super important. And you got to get a foundation in first. So we really say focus on those core processes so you can get everybody that win you need. You're getting value on your investment as soon as possible. You're doing your best not to burn your people out and giving them some, a place to launch from in all regards into the future. Yeah, David, how about you? What comes up for you?
Yeah, you took the words crawl, walk, run right out of my mouth on that one for sure. And to kind of equate it to something I think Sam mentioned earlier with ERPs, like learning a new language. As you're going through that implementation process and rolling things out, it's almost like learning a new sport as well. If you've never played a certain sport before, you've got to get the fundamentals down before you go out and start trying to run trick plays and doing all sorts of crazy advanced sort of things. And too many times in that implementation process, whether it's the stakeholders or decision makers kind of have this pressure feeling that we've got to get every single thing we could possibly do done for the go live. And that's just, as you mentioned, that's going to stretch projects out from 12 months to 24 months. And it's really just setting you up for disaster, so to speak. And, we try to really map everything out at the beginning, but then foster this whole mentality of continuous improvement. That your ERP is really never done. You've got the basics, you go live, then you need to immediately be into, I like to say, phase 1.5. It's not really 2. It's, what are the things we want to do right after we get steady, and you just keep building on that and building on that. And, there's even been a lot of talk in the industry too about, whether there's such a thing as an agile ERP implementation or not. And, I think that kind of flows in with the whole continuous improvement mentality. And once you get those building blocks in place, now we're going to make this small improvement, this other small improvement, and just keep building on that over time to really get you, to where you ultimately want to be, and keep everyone engaged with the process. Sam, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you so much. Great insights again, guys. And I am actually going to do a little bit of rephrasing of the question. Because as you can tell by now, listening to me, I am not necessarily a buzzword guy. I like to get into details. So here, when you talk about key business processes, what is key? Can we define that? So let's first revisit, why are we buying an ERP? Okay, we are buying an ERP because that's a product that has been developed, I don't know how many times that has been tested, installed successfully at least 5,000, 10,000 times. That's the reason why we are buying an ERP, because that reduces the financial risk for us. Now, if you take that premise, Now let's go back to your key business processes. So typically people talk about, hey, you know what? Look for 80-20, because those are the processes that you should be paying attention to. You sort of build the checklist. You know what? I should be caring for my order to cash. I should be caring for, my ERP should be able to do my, sales process, my purchase process, my procurement process. And by the time you are going to implement that ERP, you are going to discover that the critical success factors that you had for your industry, they are not necessarily covered by the ERP. And then you are again implementing an ERP on top of an ERP, which is going to very likely fail because you did not define what is key for you, what is 80% for you. So 80% is going to be in identifying what are the real critical success factors that is going to make or break your business. So if you document your requirement, identify what defines your business. If you don't have this specific functionality, for example, some ERP systems support, let's say, the payment term at the line item level, right? If you have that requirement as part of your business model and you are not willing to change your business model, then you need to find a solution that supports your requirement to begin with. If you have very complex sales compensation model, then you need to find an ERP that supports that requirement. So it gets that detailed. ERP systems are not meant to be simple. They are not designed to be simple. They are very complex. So make sure you understand your business first before you implement in your ERP. Shelly, what are your thoughts?
Well, thank you for that. You guys took a lot of words right out of my mouth, particularly crawl, walk, run. I use that terminology all the time. It gives people a way to look at it and to say we can actually take this in phases, intelligent phases. We can do that. And I really appreciate it. I even wrote it down, the fixed asset example. I get that all the time. We have to have fixed assets. You are talking about one user over here who's quite skilled and knows how to manage that on the spreadsheets, which is not what we want long term, but they do know how to do it. It's really working very well as it can until we get it in the system. And then you have the warehouse where there's no barcoding and no scanners. You know what I mean? And that person that's doing the fixed assets, that is their number one issue. That's their key business process, if you will, whereas the business may have a different key business process. So back to kind of what Sam was saying, I like, what is it? What are the main key business processes? Let's make sure those are getting addressed, but that's also make sure the other things are going to integrate with it well. Your chart of accounts is nimble and all of that. It's good to look forward, but we also need to make sure that our process is not driven by a couple of users that may be in the boardroom with you that have a few requirements that are actually being met by skilled people while the rest of the business is struggling and they just don't know about it. They don't understand that, boy, if that warehouse was more efficient, we'd have more customers. And if the receiving process, and boy, the demand planning process is a mess. It's all on spreadsheets, and that, is much more difficult than fixed assets. So yeah, I hope nobody thinks I don't think fixed assets are important. They are, and all those allocation schedules and all of that is very complex. But what I'm trying to say is that crawl, walk, run, phased approach, it allows you to train people as you go, bring people in, and there's nothing better than one department being super excited about the system to get another department looking over the cubicle or the warehouse wall or whatever, and wanting it to be them next. And I had that at one site where the warehouse, we took manufacturing first, and then we were going out to the warehouse, and they said, we're finally next. They were excited and ready to go. And then you have the fear that I talked about earlier, it's not there. So I agree with everything everyone said and echo it strongly. Lauren, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, you guys really hard pressed to find new things to say because I'm always answering last, but I've got a few points and, hopefully they'll add as equal value to what you guys brought up. But I think in order to define key business processes, you need to define all business processes and then prioritize them. Okay, so that means you've documented them. That's a good step. That's an important part of an evaluation and selection process. The rabbit hole a lot of companies fall into is they think they need to define the key processes before they start. And think of the flaw in that logic. I think Sam brought it up. You're looking to a new ERP for specific reasons, and they're largely because your current systems aren't up to snuff. They're not meeting the need. So don't think that you or even some smart consultants that you hire can map your, your as is to be processes before you begin evaluating technologies, new ways of doing things in other industries that do similar things to you, other companies in your industry. The process of evaluation and selection will help you better understand that to be potential. And David said something I think that was probably the most critical, the notion of continuous improvement. If you think that when you implement your ERP and define a new process for something that it's over, you're going to be in the same position you were in 5 years down the road. If you have a continuous improvement mentality, you'll always look to optimize processes as part of your everyday business. And that's going to keep you lean and mean for years to come and enable you to get the most value out of whatever technologies you require. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lauren. And we're actually going to stick around for some questions. So thanks to the panel for being so efficient with your time and so informative, thought out. You guys are all clearly experts. We had some interesting questions to come in that I wanted to pass by the panel in our winning minutes here. So Mark Smith, one of our attendees, asked a question that one thing that was said during the seminar was that ERP is not the answer to every process you have, and you still may have multiple processes. If this is true, then why have an ERP if I'm not cutting down on the quantity of systems being used? So, maybe somebody like to answer that?
I'd take just a stab at that. Oh, go ahead, Lauren. Go ahead.
Well, I haven't answered anything first, so I'm a little gun shy.
Right on. Go ahead.
Well, again, the objective of an optimal process, right, to evaluate, select, and implement an ERP system is about balance. Okay, you're not throwing everything old out, and you're not going to do everything in the new system. You've got to find that balance, okay? And yes, you will definitely reduce the total number of systems. That should be one of your objectives with an ERP system, but you're not going to eliminate all of them. It's finding that balance that you can do during evaluation and selection before you get to implementation, right? You'll learn enough about the systems, and more specifically, the one that you're ideally looking for, to find that equilibrium, okay? And that equilibrium will change if you adopt a continuous improvement philosophy over time, right? Because you'll then minimize other systems over time, and you can't do it all at once. So I'm hoping I'm answering the question. Yes, you are trying to minimize the overall number of systems, but it is a balance. And it's a balance that you'll, weigh in your favor more over time, meaning you'll reduce more systems over time if you adopt the right philosophy.
I'll just kind of add quickly, it really also depends on what your needs are, because many ERP systems are going to cover a lot of different areas. You're going to have customer relationship management, field service, full manufacturing, but it's really about what your business needs are. So for some folks, maybe some kind of limited product lifecycle management as an example in the ERP is perfect, but then others, depending on your business, you may need a tool specifically for product lifecycle management or human resources. So it's really goes all the way back to kind of the early discussions around what your needs are. And while your ERP is going to be the core, it sort of should be the foundation for these other sort of satellite things that may fit a very specific niche in your business.
And guys, I am going to address that question as well, because I was the one who actually brought up that comment. So I am actually going to bring one of the episodes, and I am the podcast host. So we did one episode with a guy called Randy Johnston. And if anybody who has been connected in the accounting community, Randy Johnston is the top 9 accounting tech star. He would have influenced every single accounting system out there. One of the comments that he mentioned is an average business has roughly 300 different business processes. And these are the monetary processes, which means the ones that actually touch some sort of dollars. You are going to have some sort of non-financial processes as well. And they are going to be, let's say, I don't know, maybe 600, 900. So now if you utilize a system for each of those processes, then you are going to have 300 systems. And then you are going to have far more systems to integrate those, because the integration itself could be an ERP system, because you have to develop something, you have to test that, and you have to make it work. So ERP system is meant to be your financial glue in the organization. That's what it is good at. So the more financial processes you can incorporate inside the ERP system, the better your organization is going to be. The other systems, as David pointed out, CRM, pre-sales, whatever you do, you don't necessarily touch dollars in that. That's just marketing automation. You are having a little fun. Who cares for that? Utilize whatever system you want. You are doing some analysis on the sideways. Who cares for that? That's not really the financial backbone of your organization. You don't necessarily need to have control in your analytics. You can have an add-on, you can have another system, but backbone, operational backbone, financial glue is what an ERP is.
I'll just add one final comment. Oh, thanks, Shelley. I'll just add one final comment. One of the things to think about when you're in this evaluation process is if you do have some unique requirements that might not allow you for an ERP solution to be the end all be all. Again, it's foundational. It should do most of what your business needs to do. But if you have some special requirements, one of the things that we look at when we're looking at an ERP is future forward. If I know I need PLM, if I know I need CRM, HR, some of these extra things or some specialized functionality, I look for partners and solutions for our clients that can help them get there down the road. So, right, we kind of target 80%, that foundational element from the ERP, hopefully giving a company about 80% of that foundation, but then making sure that we understand how does that solution serve some of those extraneous areas down the road that a company might need, so that we are future forward in our looking, where you may not be doing all of that right away, or it may not have all the pieces you need right out of the gates. It should do about 80%, unless you've got some wild, crazy complexity, and some companies do. But then it looks forward and down the road to, does it already integrate with some of these? Does it already have a best of breed that really connects well with this? So we do want to think about that during the process as well.
And real quick, with NetSuite Cloud ERP, one of the things is it's very flexible, super flexible. It's wonderful. But what that means is that you can actually go your own route and try to customize things and make it do exactly what you want it to do. Or you can look, as Aaron was talking about, into the ecosystem, and there's these partners who have created and specialized in different areas that you can purchase that are maybe more specific to you, that integrate already with NetSuite. And I'm using just that as an example. It's all ERPs. But what is special about that is those partners have very specific things they're doing, and you don't have to create it yourself. And then there are some processes you really don't want to automate because it's taking the human element out of it. So while we want ERP to do as much as it can, and a lot of people say, well, why does it have this limitation? Everybody's doing this. They're all doing it different, and you may have a special case where you do need to go to a more specialized solution. Don't be afraid of that. There's nothing to be concerned about. These are good partners that have specialized and have integrated very well.
Well, thanks everybody. We are at time, but before any attendees go, feel free to enter a question into this webinar platform, and we will do our best to get that answered for you. David, Lauren, Shelley, Aaron, Sam, thank you guys so much for, really donating your time to help educate people on ERP and how to approach an ERP implementation. Really appreciate it.
Been a pleasure. Hopefully
Thanks
it
very
helps.
much.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Keith. Had a lot of fun.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Bye, guys. We'll keep this running just so people can get their remaining questions in. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for attending.